Hi, everybody. Jay Baba. We are really excited to be here today and to have Susan with us and all of you. As you know, Susan has written this epic book, epic and beautiful book about Meher Baba's Blue Bus Tours. And today she's going to share with us how this book came to be and the things that she's learned that she didn't know before getting into this book. Following her talk, we're going to have time for questions. And if you have any questions at any time, just write them in the chat. And when the time comes, I will field those questions to Susan. So now, if you're ready, Susan, without further ado, please help us silently clap welcome Susan McKendree. Jai Baba.
Well, this was a long time coming, and this is not how I envisioned my book launch to look, but I'm nonetheless grateful that we have Zoom to bring us together. That's for sure. I want to start out by thanking all of you for tuning in, and also to thank just a few of the people who made this book possible, especially Sheila Krinsky and Andy Lesnick, who kind of walked me through this long and winding road from a manuscript to a book, and especially Sheila for her book design, because she brought the book to life. She took my manuscript and just breathed life into it. And I also want to thank all the other people who applied their wisdom and skills that brought the book to fruition. There are tons and tons of you, and if you want to know who you are, you can read the acknowledgments at the beginning of my book. This was a process that took more than 8 years, and I had no idea that it would take that long. In fact, I had no idea when I first started on it that this is where it was going to lead. In the summer of 2012, I decided I wanted to schedule a Baba meeting, and I asked myself the question, what's a phase of Baba's work that I don't know very much about that I'd like to know more about? And immediately, almost before I articulated the questions, the Blue Bus Tours just popped up in my head, and they popped up with such authority that I didn't question it. I didn't think, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. You know, maybe I'll write that down and think of some other things and, you know, see what else comes up. It was just like, oh, okay, it's the Blue Bus Tours. Well, I thought I was just going to do one meeting and be done with it. But I was flabbergasted when I opened up Lord Meher and Meher and Meher and saw that there were nearly 500 pages of documentation just there. And then I knew about the memoirs, some of the stories that I had read in the past, and I was pretty sure there were other references to the tours, but I didn't know where to start. And I thought, well, you know, I have no context for this story. I thought, you know, the first thing I need is like a synopsis of the tours, you know, what the tours were, the dates of the tours, where they went, and so on. Well, it didn't exist. There was just no such thing. And so I was really working blind. I was beginning to put together a puzzle that I didn't have a picture of it. I had no idea what it was supposed to look like. And it became obvious to me immediately that there's no way I was going to be able to do this in one talk. First of all, I couldn't assimilate the information in time, and secondly, I couldn't fit it all into, you know, an hour or an hour and 15 minutes worth of presentation. So I thought, well, I'll start with the first tour. And it was pretty daunting at the beginning because I had no context. I had no idea where I was going or where we had been before we got into the bus, and it was just really difficult. And I finished the presentation, and I didn't like it at all. In fact, I hated it, you know, but I couldn't figure out what to do about it. And I hated it so much that either I made myself sick or Baba made me sick so I wouldn't embarrass myself by presenting this talk that I just wasn't happy with. And so I had to postpone it. That gave me, I think, about 6 weeks leeway. And I actually ended up throwing away what I had started with and starting over from scratch. And the second time around, it was a lot easier, and I felt a lot better about what I had done so far. So I made the presentation, and I asked the people at the meeting at the end, I said, should I keep going? And they all said, yes, yes, keep going. So I did. So that then I focused on the second tour, and that one was a lot easier to put together because I was beginning to have some context for the story in its, I guess, in its magnitude or entirety. And then something happened that night. I went to bed, and I woke up at, I don't know what time it was. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I felt like I was like floating on these waves of happiness, just floating, like I was lifted off my bed. And I heard Baba saying to me internally, I am so pleased. I am so pleased. I am so pleased. Just over and over and over again. And while I'm being buoyed up on these waves, and they were very specifically happiness. I don't know how I knew that. They weren't, joy or bliss or anything like that. They were happiness. And Baba's saying, I am so pleased, over and over and over again. And I don't know how long it lasted, but, there was a moment when I was there with Baba, or lifted off my bed, and then I was lying in my bed again, and it was over. And the first thing I thought was, my God, why does my face hurt? Put my hands up, my face and my cheeks were just aching. And I realized I was smiling, and that I had been smiling for so long that it made my face hurt. It was just so sweet and so amazing. And I knew then that I was on the right track, that I was doing something that Baba really wanted me to do. So I did the 2 more talks. I got to the end of the 4th talk. I decided to end the tours where at the point where the blue bus was retired. I know practically all the other sources just kind of let the blue bus tours just kind of segue into other stories. And they talk about some of Baba's subsequent must tours as blue bus tours, but there was no blue bus. The blue bus had been retired. And so for my intents and purposes, I decided that a story has to end somewhere, and I decided that it was going to end at the end of the 4th tour. And so I was just so relieved to be done. I'd spent like 4 or 5 months working on this, and it was just such a sense of accomplishment. I thought, I'm done, it's finished. And as soon as I got done, everybody said, well, what are you going to do with this? And I said, do with it? I'm done with it. And they said, no, you have to go on with it. You have to write a book. And I think I actually laughed out loud. It seemed so preposterous to me in that moment. But once the seed was planted, I couldn't let it go. There was the part of me my head was saying, you can't write a book. Are you out of your mind? You have no idea what you're committing to. But my heart was saying, well, you still have questions. You were only able to focus on such a small part of the expanse of the Blue Bus Tour's stories in the time you had, and I started to think, well, if I had more questions, maybe other people would have more questions. But I just went round and round and round like this for quite some time, and finally at some time it dawned on me that, I've worked at Biltmore Estate in the 90s up till 2005 for 15 years. And for 10 years of that, I worked in the museum services department. And I did a huge amount of research. And just this huge number of manuscripts and documents were gifted to us at that time. It was my job to transcribe them and to interpret them. And I realized that if I took all that work that I did at Biltmore and pieced it together, which wouldn't have been too hard to do, it would have been the equivalent of a book, a pretty big book. But I still was daunted by the process of writing and publishing a book, and I was still, pretty hesitant. So at the end of I guess it was the third music Sahabas. We were at the Odyssey School. It was August of 2013, and we were finished up, and everybody was packing up their stuff and putting it in their cars to go. And I was packing up my artwork, and I ran into Charlie Gardner, and Charlie waylaid me, and he was putting his stuff away, and he said, he said, I've been working on the decorations for the Southeast Gathering for years and years. And he said, I'm really burned out. And I knew about this. I knew that he was trying to find someone to replace him. And he said, and he really laid it on. He's so funny. He just really buttered me up about how beautiful my artwork was and how beautiful it would look on the stage and how I could do this and do that. And then he stopped, and there was this moment where I don't know how to describe it, but it was like the world stopped spinning for a moment. And then all of a sudden it started spinning again. And I said, Charlie, I'm really sorry I can't do that. I'm writing a book. And that was it. When I said that out loud, I just knew there was no going back. There was no taking it back, and that I had to do it. But it wasn't a sense of, oh my God, what have I done? It was like, oh, I am writing a book. I was really, in that moment, I just became really excited about it. And so that's when, even though I'd been working on it for a long time, I didn't know I'd been working on it, but that's when it became intentional for me to take the story of the Blue Bus Tours and turn them into a book. So beginning in August of 2013, I started writing. And by May of 2014, I thought, oh, well, I'm halfway through. I was up to the Bangalore chapter, and I was finally at the point where I knew I wasn't going to quit. And not that there was ever a question of quitting, but I just knew, I had, I guess, developed enough confidence with it to think that I was ready to talk to somebody about it. So I called Sheila and made an appointment to meet with Sheila and Andy at the bookstore in May when I came down for a pilgrimage, so I could kind of sell my book idea to them. Well, as it turns out, they already knew all about it. Winnie Barrett had already told them everything. And so I didn't have to use my sales pitch, which would probably have been pretty pitiful anyway, because that's not where my strengths lie. But they were really encouraging. Of course, they couldn't make any promises that the foundation would want to publish the book, but they said, keep going with it and we'll just see where it goes. They really encouraged me to keep doing that, keep going with it, and that was really helpful at that point. And I was just walking on air when I got back to the center. I went into the refectory kitchen to get something to drink, and it was a Wednesday afternoon in May, and it was full of people. I don't know who all these people were because I hadn't seen them before, but it was like wall-to-wall people, and there was just this cacophony of voices in the background. And over top of all those voices, I heard somebody say, well, Baba always said if you can't afford to go to India, you shouldn't go. And the last thing that we had discussed was that I was going to need to go to India in order to do research to write the book. And I just thought, oh crap, even if someone paid for my ticket, which they did, it was still going to be a really expensive and complicated undertaking. And that evolved into, well, I'm not really sure I'm ready to go back to India. And so I got locked in this horrible loop of, I have to go to India to write the book. I have to do it. It wasn't like, I don't want to do it. I have to go to India to write the book. And it's like, well, I don't have enough money to go to India. And I'm not even sure that I want to go to India, but I have to go to India. And it was just horrible. This went on for a week probably before it finally occurred to me to give it to Baba. So I went to my altar, to the picture of Baba that I always talk to, and I just laid it out in front of him. And I said, I need to know what you want me to do, as if there was any question anyway. But I said, you need to be really clear, because I can be really hard-headed, and, it can't be something that happens when I'm looking the other way or whatever. I said, you really have to knock me in the head with a 2x4 to make sure that I get it. And I said, just tell me what your order is and I'll do it. So as soon as I did that, it was like all of that weight lifted off my shoulders. And I went to bed that night and I slept like I hadn't slept in 2 weeks. And again, I was awakened at 3 or 4 in the morning, and Baba was standing there next to my bed. And I won't go into the whole thing because it's a whole story of its own, but the gist of it was that at the very end, he said he had opened his arms to me, and of course I went to him. But at the very end, just before it was over, he said, "I am waiting for you." And I was just stunned. And then it was over, and I was lying in my bed again, like gasping for breath, like I hadn't even been breathing during the whole thing, and thinking, oh my God, what just happened? And so I lay there and thought about it over and over and over again. And what I really thought was when he said, "I am waiting for you," that he was like waiting for me to come to him, the big picture. And which was in itself really very amazing. And then it wasn't until dawn that it occurred to me that that was the answer to my request for an order. I asked for an order and he gave me an invitation, and how could I turn it down? And so, from that point on, I was really excited about the trip, and I started to plan for it, and I kept on writing. So by September, which was when I was supposed to go to Mehrabad, I had pretty much finished the Bangalore chapter of the book. And right before it was time to leave, I went back into Lord Mayhair to check something, and to my horror, David had taken down the original version of Lord Mayhair and replaced it with the revised version. And I looked at it and I thought, oh crap, every single footnote that I've done for the past 8 chapters is going to have to be renumbered. And so I went to India knowing that that was going to be the first thing I had to do when I came back, and I can tell you that it felt pretty daunting at that point. So I went to, I spent 3 months at Mehrabad. Sheila was good enough to organize the opportunity for me to do research in the archives, which is not something that they're set up to do, and needed some adjustments on their part. And so I felt really honored to be able to do that. And the other thing that I remembered, which is kind of funny, is that the first time I went to Mehrabad was in 2007, 7 years before, and somebody had also paid for my ticket. And so I figured, I was going to get the most bang for my buck. I was going to stay as long as I could. So I stayed for 3 months, and guess what I volunteered doing? Volunteered in the archives. So they already knew me, and it was already like maybe having at least a toe in the door. And all I could think was, look how Baba is preparing me for this. It was so sweet when I made the connection between that time and this opportunity. So I'm going to talk about the work in the archives and the materials that they gave me in a little while, because it makes more sense to talk about them when I talk about sources. But I came home in the middle of December, and I spent the next 2 months basically catching up. First I had to go into Lord Mayhair and change every single footnote and correct it to match the pages in the revised version. And then I had to take the materials that they'd given me at the archives and go all the way back to the beginning again, and weave that information in. So it was a couple of months before I even got to write a single new word of a new chapter. And I was really chomping at the bit at that point, as you can kind of imagine. So between February of 2015 and April of 2017, which is a little over 2 years, all I did was write and edit, write and edit, write and edit. And I have no idea how many drafts I went through once I had finished the first draft. And there was some point, I guess it was, well, I don't remember exactly when it was. It may have been like the beginning of 2017. I thought, okay, I think I'm ready to let somebody else look at this. So I asked some people if they would be readers for me and would read the chapters as I sent them one at a time and, give me feedback. And so the people I asked were Ken and Barb Richstad, because they're both writers, Irma Shepherd, who's a writer and poet and also an editor, and Corinne Merrill, who just loves Baba so much that I wanted her to be a part of that process, because I knew each of them was going to offer me different kinds of feedback. And so, I was really pleased that all of them said that they would. And so over the next few months, as I finished a chapter and said, okay, I think I'm ready to let this go, then I would send it to them and they'd send it back. And we did that as we worked all our way, the whole way through the book. And I don't know how many drafts I did, honestly. I'd probably be worth a small fortune if I had like $100 or something for every draft, because I learned what every writer learns is that it's really hard to let go of your work. It's really hard to know when you've done your best. And, I felt a lot of, I don't know if pressure's the right word, but I felt a lot of responsibility that this was for Baba. And if I was going to give it to him and expect him, to take it from me and make it his and do something with it, that I had to have done my best before I did that. And it took a long time to get to that point. But by the spring of 2017, I was at that point. And so I submitted the manuscript to the Sheriar Foundation in April. And I decided that I was going to go down to the center, because April 29th is my anniversary of coming to Baba. And April 29th was the day that the foundation was meeting. And it felt hugely auspicious. So I don't remember, I got there before the 29th, and the first thing I did when I got on the center, even before I moved any of my stuff into a cabin, was I took a hard disk of the manuscript into the lagoon cabin. And I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I put it on Baba's chair just for a moment. And then I put it on the floor and I bowed down and I said, Baba, this is yours. I can't do any more with it. I need your help from here on out. And so that's, at that point, that's what I did. And I just had to let go of it. And I've got to say, now it was more than a year and a half before I found out that the foundation was going to publish the book. They had a lot of other projects in the pipeline, and they wanted to get some of those projects out of the way before they were ready to take anything else on. And this is just my intuition, but I really think they might have been holding out for what's her name? The book on Erich, Devana's book. I had to wonder if they weren't holding out for Devana's book, and that she was going to go ahead of me, which rightly she should have, because she'd been working on her book longer than I have. But by the time they were ready to make a commitment, I had given them my manuscript and she still wasn't ready to let hers go. And so, I feel like sometimes I jumped the line. I felt like really, really fortunate to have come in then, because it would probably have been another couple of years if Devana had submitted her manuscript before I submitted mine, and that would have been fine. So they decided, the foundation decided in October that they were going to publish the book, but Andy didn't tell me until January, when I emailed him to ask him a question. And he emailed me back and he's like, oh, by the way, the foundation decided they're going to publish your book. And I'm like, what? You knew this for 2 months and you didn't tell me? 3 months? It was really funny, but then I just laughed, because that's just another of Baba's little tricks on me. And he said that Leah, I knew that Leah Florence was going to do the editing, and that, excuse me, that, that would be the first step in the process. And he said, well, Leah's finishing up another project. It'll be a little while before she can get to it. Well, she got to it by the beginning of March, before I had time to take a deep breath. And so we just dove into it. And it was an 8-month process of sending chapters back and forth and back and forth. It was so complicated, that there were times when I was afraid I was losing track of what we were doing, because we might have 3 chapters going back and forth at the same time in various stages of editing. But finally, we got it done. I sent it to Sheila in I think it was the fall. Sheila, was it the fall of 2020? I can't remember anymore. But then Sheila started to lay it out. And at that point, then we had to start talking about photos, which was not something that I had focused on. And so that was a really almost a daunting process. And of course, I picked out 3 times as many photos as what we could use. But that was good because it gave Sheila photos to choose from. And then by late winter, it was ready. It was laid out and ready to be proofread. And so then at that point, I started working with Sheila Gamble, and had a wonderful experience with her as well. And at the same time, the proofreading was going on. David Fenster was fact checking, and a man named Larry Nestle from Chapel Hill. Some of you may know him. He had volunteered to help with the index, which is the last thing you do in a book. And so he got started on that. And so there was all this stuff happening at the same time. And of course, David had corrections and some things that he wanted me to changes that he wanted me to make, most of which I chose to make. And he gave me some really good information, including some new stuff that I wasn't able to use because the book was already laid out, and I couldn't add anything to it without taking something else away from it. And you know, so it was a real challenge to add anything to the book at that point, with it, you know, the layout being set in stone at that time. And then in October, it was printed, and Sheila sent it to a bindery in Nashville to give it a special binding, because it's like a heavy-duty binding because the book is so fat. And if you look at it, you can see how it's glued down on the sides of the spine, so that it won't fall apart. And I just want to say something. This is my teachable moment. Never, this is what kills a book. Never take a book that you're reading and lay it down like that when you're taking a break or whatever. Never lay a book down open like that, because that's what breaks the spine in a book. And we don't want that to happen. So that's my lesson, and that's over. I want to talk a little bit about sources and my writing process. I'm generally a pretty disciplined person, and so it wasn't hard for me to step in and create a discipline that was going to see me through to the end of the book. I thought of it as my job, and not only my job, but who was my employer? It was Baba. And so, you know, I took it really, really seriously. I got up every day at the same time. I was at the computer by 9 o'clock, or sometimes even earlier. To start, I tried to work 8 hours a day, and that was just crazy, out of the question. I was exhausted when I was done, and it wasn't worth pushing myself that hard. So I worked from 9 till 3 or 4, and I took lots of little breaks. And I worked Monday through Thursday because I had to set Fridays aside for errands and, you know, householder things, and which I greatly resented having to do because it took me away from the writing. And then I came back and wrote on Saturday. Sometimes I wrote on Sunday. It depended on whether, you know, what momentum I had going, and was I in the middle of a story that I wanted to keep telling or what. So, you know, sometimes I worked as much as 6 days a week. Every moment I spent away from my computer, you know, taking care of all the other things I had to do, just felt like a wasted moment to me. I just really always wanted to be back at the computer and writing. And I realized after a while that it wasn't work. I mean, it sounds like work, but it really wasn't work. It was Leela. I've done a huge amount of, historical research in the past, and so I already love it. I was already passionate about the process, and then, add to that the fact that this was a story for Baba, and it was just beautiful. There were days when I'd look at the clock and it would be 1 o'clock, and I'd look up again and it would be 2:30 or 3, and I wouldn't have been aware of any passage of time. Um, there were times when I started to feel maybe a little bit daunted. I never wanted to quit, but I would reach these points where I knew I wasn't doing this by myself, and I needed Baba's help. And I would just, and not that I didn't have it, but there were times when I felt like I had to say it out loud to him, Baba, I need your help because I can't do this by myself. And I don't know how many times I said that, hundreds and hundreds of times, and he was always there. I would say that to him, and then I'd start writing again, and I'd get some momentum, and it would be okay. So that was the writing process that I developed. And the other thing that I did was I found so many sources that I had to make a checklist to make sure that I wouldn't miss any of them as I was working my way through them, to make sure that I was piecing the chapters together, I guess, in a consistent way. And at the beginning, I started out using Lord Mayhair because that's where everybody begins. And it was really hard work. And I likened it to digging a foundation of a house or a building, which is really hard work, but you've got to do it before you can do anything else. And I don't know if any of you remember the quote I used I think it's pretty close to the beginning of the book. It's a quote from a theologian named Thomas More, who said, I would rather live in a bungalow of stories than a warehouse of facts. And I read that quote like 20 years ago, and it just stuck with me because I just loved it. And I was so happy to be able to incorporate it into the book. And, I began to realize that Lord Mayhair was that warehouse of facts, which is not, it's not a criticism of Lord Mayhair. It's just what it is. It's this huge compilation of what they did and what Baba did, when he did it, where he did it, and it's wonderful, but it's still a warehouse of facts. And I just had such a hard time working with it at the beginning. And the same thing with Mahara Mayhair, and it just dawned on me today that the problem that I was having was that Lord Mayhair and Mahara Mayhair were things that we're all familiar with. I was working with material that had a story that had already been told in bits and pieces. And I guess that's what made me uncomfortable. And it wasn't until I started to really piece the rest of the story together from the other sources that I started to feel a lot better with what I was doing. It was like I dug the foundation with with Lord Mayhair, and I laid out the rooms with my outlines and timelines and so forth. And then, by the time I picked up Mahara Mayhair, it was like I was beginning to furnish the rooms and decorate the rooms, and that's the part of it that I love. So there was Lord Mayhair and Mahara Mayhair. The ironic thing about Lord Mayhair is that I bought a bunch of early volumes of it at a very good price a number of years ago, and the volume about the Blue Bus Tours was missing. So I didn't have that one to work with. I had to borrow it. But, I worked online most of the time with the Lord Mayhair as it was available there because it was searchable and it was easy to find things. And then, of course, I turned to all the memoirs, which again are, familiar to people in bits and pieces. But, I realized that there's this story in there that's never been pieced together and told. And this was the point where it really the process began to be fun. From there, I went to mondelyhall.org and I spent hours and hours and hours transcribing interviews from, not just Monty and Erich and Katie, who were, for the most part, the big storytellers for the Blue Bus tours, but also Merwan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the series of interviews that Ward did in 1994 with Merwan. I think there are maybe 10 of them. He did them in Mondeley Hall, but the doors were closed. No one else was there. So there are no distractions. There's like this little tiny bit of background noise, but it doesn't intrude. And he just spent hours and hours and hours letting Merwan tell his story. And it's so beautiful to hear him telling his stories himself. And so I probably spent a lot more time with his interviews than with anyone else's. And what was so wonderful about his stories was that it was the addition of a child's voice. I had all these women's voices, all these multiple perspectives from the women, but a child sees things differently. And when I was at Mehrabad, or Mehrazad, during my pilgrimage in 2014, Merwan was kind enough to tell these stories again. I don't know how many times he told them, hundreds of times, but it was as if he was telling them and we were hearing them for the first time. It was that he told them in such a compelling and heartfelt way. And it was really wonderful to sit there and listen to him tell these stories to me that I was already familiar with, but there's something about hearing him tell them right there in front of me that was just really, it made it really, really special. Of course, there were all kinds of journals and magazines. The Meher Baba journals. These are facsimiles from the first year of publication, and I only had access to the first year in print, and then I think at the time that I was doing the work, those were the only ones that were available at the Trust website. Or maybe not. Maybe I went in and at least did the second year's worth of books. But then I got ahead of what was on the Trust website. And so I had to go to the center to use the library there. And lo and behold, the copies of the Meher Baba tours, Meher Baba journal that they had were bound copies that Norina had made in these huge, thick, fat blue volumes, like 3 inches thick. And so I was working with her copies of the magazines, of the journals, and it was really, there was something really sweet about working with them. It just made them, I don't know, feel more alive that way. So that was really special. And then, of course, you know, there were publications like The Awakener and Glow International, which had tons of articles and interviews that I was able to draw from. And I'll talk a little bit now about the work I did in the archives, because, you know, that kind of exhausts most of the sources that I had here at hand. So in the archives, I was given access to copies of 3 of Mani's diaries. The first one was the Red Letter book, which contained 2 sets of notes. First set of notes was referred to from the time that the women moved back up to Mehrabad, to Upper Mehrabad, after all of the work had been done and Meher Retreat had been finished. And then the second set of notes were specifically about all the hints that Baba started dropping about a tour, which they didn't believe to begin with, and, you know, slowly began to realize that he was serious. And so that whole run up to the final decision to take a tour in a bus, all of that is recorded in the Red Letter book. The second diary that I had access to was Baba's talks with the women Mandali that Mani kept from about the middle of the second tour till the middle of the third tour. And then the last one, of course, was Mani's Blue Bus Tours diary. But I decided, since that one was probably going to be the most challenging to make notes from, I decided I'd finish up the other 2 first. And as I got closer and closer to working on Mani's diary, I'd flip through it, and I would just think, oh my God, where do I start? It was like every word of it had some kind of value. Every word of it was just like a little jewel that I didn't want to miss out on. So this basically, this is what I was working with. This was a copy of the cover, which I think is illustrated in the book. And then these were the copies of the pages in it, all handwritten. And I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I summoned the nerve to ask Meredith if I could have a copy of Monty's diary to take home. I told her I had no idea where to start with it, that every single word of it was important. And I thought, there's no way they're going to say yes, but they won't say it if I don't ask. And so, you know, I fully expected her to say, no, are you crazy? We can't do that. But she didn't. She was kind of thoughtful about it. She said, well, you know, let me run it past everybody else. Well, the next Monday, she said, we decided you can have a copy of the diary. And it was all I could do not to jump up and down. I was so excited and so relieved, because the challenge of working with all those materials was that I couldn't pace myself. I didn't know. I still had other things to look at. I had no idea how long they were going to take. And all I could do was just work at it relentlessly until I ran out of time. So this part I think is just really kind of funny. They made me make my own copy of it. For some reason, they didn't want to copy it on their copier. So they sent me to Ahmednagar with their copy, the copy that they had given me to work on. They sent me to a specific printer to get it copied, and it in itself is it's a whole story. It's like a whole major epic adventure that there's not time to talk about. I wish there were, but it was crazy. But I made the copy and I came back, and but then they took it from me. They wouldn't let me have it until I left, because even if I had locked it in my cupboard, it was like, oh no, that's not secure enough. So I had to wait until I came home in order to actually have it in my hands. And then of course I had to sign all kinds of waivers, you know, in order to do that. So I was just finishing up with Baba's talks with the women Mandali, and I think it was a Friday afternoon, and Meredith said, you know, I'm really almost finished putting these documents together for you. She had been working in the Adi K. Irani collection, the AKI collection, pulling together documents that spanned the length of the Blue Bus tours and that spoke specifically about them. There were over 600 of them. And she said to me, she said, you know, I'm almost done with these. When are you going to be ready for them? And I said, Monday morning. So the timing was just really perfect. And I came back Monday morning, and oh, what a week that was. I had to work on one of their computers because the documents were in a file. They were PDFs that had to be brought up on one of their computers, and then I would make notes in my laptop. Well, I couldn't log into their computers, so Meredith would have to log me in every morning and open up the documents for me to work with, which was fine for Monday and Wednesday. But then Friday, I don't know what was happening, but they were doing something with the electrical grid in Ahmednagar, and the power was going off like every 5 to 10 minutes, and it was a nightmare. Every time it went off, I'd have to interrupt Meredith for what she was doing and say, you know, do you think, you know, when you're ready for a break, you could come over here and, you know, restart this for me? I mean, it was really awkward. So she'd come over and she'd restart the computer and log in and open up the documents for me. Well, this happened like 5 times. And the last time it happened, I just thought, oh God, just kill me now. And so I said, Meredith, it's the power. I mean, she knew the power had gone off. All the lights went off. I said, I'm going to need your help again in a minute. I'm really sorry. And she turned around in her chair and she said, I can't do this anymore. She said, I'm in the middle of this meeting and this project, and every time you interrupt me, I lose my place, and I just can't keep doing this for you. And I'm like, okay. So I thought about it and I said, well, here's a thought. Why don't we just quit? I'll just quit and go home or go back to the, to whatever. And I'll come back on Monday morning and we'll give it a fresh start. And she said, well, okay. So I came back on Monday morning and I was getting my laptop out and I asked her which computer I should set up at because they kept putting me on different computers. And she said, oh, you don't need to unpack your laptop. She said, we've decided we're going to give you a disk with, or we're going to let you take this file of PDFs home so that you can work with them at home, which will be easier for you and for us. And I just thought, oh my God, it would never have occurred to me to ask for those after I'd asked for the diary, but maybe asking for the diary kind of planted the seed. But it was such a relief at that point because 600 documents is a lot of material to read. And so I knew that it was going to be so much better to be able to bring them home. So that meant that I was only 6 weeks into my 3 months, and I still had 6 weeks left for a pilgrimage that never occurred to me that I was going to have. I fully expected to have to work like a dog, for at least 3 days a week for 3 months in order to get done whatever I could get done in that time. And now all of a sudden, I was on pilgrimage, like real pilgrimage. And at first it felt kind of weird because I had been so focused on working in the archives and get up, be at the archives at 9 o'clock and just kind of driven to get that work done. And all of a sudden that was taken away from me and I was kind of at loose ends. And finally I said, Baba, I'm kind of not prepared for this pilgrimage thing. So I said, you're going to have to help me figure out what you want me to do and how I can fill up my time, which sounds like a really stupid thing to say out loud, but I said it, because that's what I was feeling at the time. And it became such a beautiful experience. The only thing I can liken it to is, how Elizabeth said, the day becomes the answer? When I picked up her book the first time and looked at that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what Baba gave me during those last 6 weeks at Mehrabad. And so of course I continued to go to Merazad on Merazad days, but the other days I would just go up the hill and hang out. There was hardly anybody there. There was one day where I sat in the Samadhi for 2 hours, an hour of which there was no one there but me. And then the rest of the time I would just wander around the hill, the top of the hill. And, I was especially drawn to the women's graves, the women's cemetery, where Elizabeth and Nani and so forth are buried. And I just kept being drawn there. And then, and of course I would go to the other graves, the ones that are adjacent to the Samadhi. But every day I just had to make these rounds of the women's graves for some reason. And then one day, when I was standing at Kitty's grave, all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with this wave of gratitude for her and for the other women and for their lives and their stories. I almost started to cry. And I had to say it out loud to her, to thank her for everything that she had left us. And then I went around to every single other woman's grave and I did the same thing because it just didn't feel right not to. I had to say it out loud to them. And it was so beautiful. I felt this incredible connection to them. And I felt this energy from them that I'd never felt before. You go up there and it's like, Baba's energy is so strong that it overtakes everything else. But I swear I felt a different kind of energy or a separate kind of energy from their graves. And it was really powerful. And the other thing that I did was go over and sit on the stone steps up to the second floor of Meher Retreat where, the Western women's dormitories were located. And I kept remembering all the things that people said. And there's this wonderful passage from Mara where she said, that the impositions on the Westerners weren't lost to the Eastern women, that, she remembered Nani, you know, making her way down those steep stairs with no railing in her high-heeled shoes because, you know, that's just how she dressed. And then she was talking about Elizabeth, how Elizabeth would pick up Kippy under her arm and say, come on along, come along, Kippy, you know, let's go take a walk, and then carry Kippy down the stairs. And I swear, it was like I felt them walking past me, you know, and the energy there was so much like what I feel at Marazod, where I feel, that's where I feel Baba's living energy, and that's where I felt the women's living energy, because that's where they lived. It was like they were alive for me. And I tell you this because, you know, I can talk all I want about the books and sources that I used, but that time that I spent on the Hill, I think informed the book every bit as much as anything that was ever written about it, because I felt like I just took them into my heart. And it was very, very special. And if I'd had to, you know, work in the archives for the whole, you know, 3 months, I'd never have had that experience. So I was just really grateful to have that. And when I came back from Maribod, of course, then I had to work in all the new materials. And as I said, I think it was a couple of months before I actually got to write something new. And I have like 9 minutes, don't I? Okay, I'm watching my clock. I will close this in 9 minutes. Once I had Monty's diary, I started using that as the foundation for the new chapters rather than Lord Mayhair, and it made such a world of difference. I mean, the chapters were alive and breathing immediately, because her stories were, and the things that she thought to write down just really were what enlivened the tours more than anything else. There were other books that came along. Of course, I reached a point where I had to work in Donkin and Margaret's stories, because they came into the picture in Bangalore. And then, excuse me, The Joy's Path came out, and so then I was able to incorporate that. And then the other source that I used, of course, was Meher Baba's New Life to write the last chapter of the story. And it never felt like the book was done, honestly, because I kept finding things. And three things came available. Two things that I was expecting came available for me to use. One was Kathy Riley's book, Dilruba Days, which had just a few really sweet stories that I was able to work in. And then, of course, Merwan's book, My Life with Meher Baba. And I didn't have a copy of it then. I had to borrow it. But, you know, and I didn't have time to really read it, you know, from beginning to end. But I did, you know, kind of, I did peruse it. And I was able to pull a few things from it. But as I say, we were running out of time. And then at the very last minute, lo and behold, someone donated a new diary to the Trust Archives. It was called the Tagbook Diary. It's the Blue Bus in German, and it was written by Hedy. It was a journal that was kept by Hedy, handwritten, not very long, but it talked about her experiences of arriving on the Hill right up through this following spring when she went back to Switzerland. And I'm just like, oh, Baba, you know, what am I going to do with this? So there was no way that I could use extended quotes, but I was able to pull out a lot of really sweet little tidbits and work them in. But again, for everything I added, I had to take something else out. So, but it was a challenge that I was really happy to have to, you know, to add her voice to the others. So, I called that my crunch time because, you know, it was always like one eye on the clock and the other eye trying to, you know, trying to work this information in. The one missing piece throughout this whole story was Baba's original specifications for the bus. I prayed that he would reveal them to me, you know, that somebody would find a document, and, you know, I'd get an email from Meredith that, oh my God, you won't believe what we found. We found Baba's original specifications, but either they're not there, either they don't exist, or they haven't been cataloged yet. But I did get updated information from David about the interior of the bus. I had been going with the original description of the interior of the bus that came from Meher, which was that there were 20 seats. Well, guess what? There were only 15 seats. And there were 5 seats down one side, and then there was the aisle, and then there were 10 seats down the other side, which completely changed things that I had written about the bus. And I tried to go in and fix everything. And I have found in going back and reading that there are places where I missed, and they'll probably jump off the page at you the way they did at me. But I guess I'll just have to fix them, save them for next time around. The hardest part of the book to write was the epilogue. And I hope that shows when you read it. It felt like the most critically important part of the book, because that's where I pulled everything together. And, you know, what good was telling this story if I couldn't bring it to a close and show you how important it was for you to have read this story. And so I spent a huge amount of time on it, and was pretty pleased with it when I got done. I started out with a jumble of quotes and stories that I had saved all along, and like everything else, Baba helped me sift through them and turn them into something that actually made sense. The best part was just knowing that I said yes to Baba when he gave me this opportunity. At the start, I'm so silly. I thought that I was doing something for him. You know, I didn't come to Baba till I was like 56 years old. And for a long time, I was just devastated to know that I had been here and he had been here, and I didn't know. You know, the first 19 years of my life, it was really hard, you know, and I beat myself up about it. I thought, my God, you know, what did I do? What kind of horrible person was I that I had to wait all this time, you know, to know about him? And I would just go around in circles with that thought until it came to me that the book was his gift to me. And what happened was I was at Winnie's, and we had just been talking about this, and I was standing at Winnie's sink doing something, and I went through this thing again in my head, and all of a sudden I heard Baba say to me internally, he said, "I'm so sorry I had to veil myself from you for so long." And I swear his voice was breaking. I mean, he sounded so distraught. I can't tell you how distraught he sounded. And he said, and what he said was significant, or the way he said was significant, because he didn't say, "I'm sorry I did that," because it had to be the way it was. He said, "I'm sorry I had to do that," which is a world of difference. And that's when I really realized that the book was his gift, felt like his gift to me, for having had to wait so long to find him. I don't know what else to say about it. It's like, you know, at one point, well, it took so long for Shariar Foundation to commit to the book that people were saying, well, why don't you just self-publish it or get somebody else to do it? And I couldn't do that because I'd given it to Baba, and I knew that it was not something that could be self-published. You know, I was going to need a lot of guidance and help with it to turn it into a book. And, you know, they would say these things to me, and I would just think, no, I need to wait. And of course, that's what I did. But it was only with the perspective, you know, being able to look back at it in retrospect, I realized that one of the reasons why it didn't bother me that it wasn't being published was that I realized that even if none of this was ever published, nobody could ever take that time from me that I had with Baba when I was writing it. And that was the important thing. It wasn't the book, the physical book. It was it was the time that he gave me to be with him. And I can't imagine anything else in my life that's going to surpass that, the value of that time that I had with him. So, Jai Baba.
The first one was a bit of a joke from Cassandra. She said, Susan, do you get paid by the pound for this book?
I wish.
She said it is heavy, but I love everything about it.
It's, yeah, 3 pounds. I know that because I shipped a copy of it off by in a hurry from UPS, and it weighs 3 pounds. You know, one of the funny things while I was writing was, like, in the back of my mind there was this little voice that says, damn, you should be being paid, you should be paid for this, you're working so hard. And of course no paycheck ever came through, and that was not the reason for writing it. My brother asked me when I told him I was writing a book, he got really excited. He said, you could make a lot of money? I couldn't say anything for a minute. I said, no, not really. It's not that kind of book. It's a labor of love. But yeah, it was that for sure.
The second question I have here is from Evie Lindemann. She says, was Hedy's books translated from German, or do you speak German?
Oh, no, I don't speak German. They had to have it translated for me, and they sent me a tentative translation so that I could pick out the passages that I wanted to use, and the quotes, and then they had those passages retranslated, and you know, until they were really happy with them, because again, you know, we were working against the clock, and it was the quickest way for them to get the material back to me. Come on, there must be some more questions.
I just got another one from Jana Weed. Oh, sorry, that's not public.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Well, I'll go back to what I couldn't say before. Maybe I can say it now. I just wanted to say, just it's so fascinating and rewarding to hear you tell the whole tale of how this book came to be. And by the end, it was very, very obvious why Baba chose you to write this book. I mean, there's such a balance of head and heart and hard work and just beauty and reflection and openness. It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I have to warn everybody out, haven't I?
Wait, no, I have a couple more.
Okay, good.
Janet she said it was a wonderful talk and process, and thank you for sharing. And what was the process for getting the photos used in the book?
Well, I had been making notes about the photos all along, but as I say, they were just kind of random because I really needed to, I felt like I needed to focus on the writing first. But I went into, I guess there were 2 major websites that I went into. The Trust had given me, the archives had given me a printout of thumbprints or thumbnails of all of the photographs that they had, which I wasn't going to be able to get from them, but it gave me a sense of what photographs were available from other people. And so I went to David Fenster's website, Meher Nazar. I went to Martin Cook's website because he has a huge collection of photos. The MSI collection, and the other collection that I had access to, which is such a surprise, was Elizabeth's photographs. And this is another, you know, way of that Baba just kind of turned a key for me at the right time. Photos that Sheila chose are also images that you haven't seen before, which was something that we were really hoping we would be able to do, obviously, you know, instead of showing the same photos over and over that everyone has seen, even though they might be iconic photos, you know, of events that took place during the tours.
Cassandra had another question. The interviews Ward Parks did with Merwan, are they online?
Yes, go to mondeleyhall.org and go down to Talks. I think it's under Talks. Scroll down to Marwan Jasawala and just go into the list of his talks, and you'll see how many they are. And they go all the way through his life, Marwan's life with Baba. Well, up to that point anyway, up until 1994, obviously. But and I only went into like the first 3 or 4 of them because that was where I found, the part of the story that I was looking at. I never even got to listen to the later interviews, but they're so wonderful because they were done professionally. When you listen to the interviews of the women on Mayor's Porch and even the talks in Mondeley Hall when it's full of people, it's hard to understand them sometimes. There's a lot of background noise. So it was a real joy to find these interviews that had been recorded so intentionally and so carefully. I can't recommend them enough if you really are interested in more about Marwan's life.
Okay, we have a question from Scott. He said, will there be a photo of the inside of the bus from during the tours? What a great talk and so much effort. Looking forward to reading your book. Thank you, J. Meher Baba.
Well, I would have given my left arm for a photograph of the interior of the bus. Obviously, we don't have it, or it would have been in there. Even that picture that, I'm not sure where it originated, but I think I saw it in, I want to say it was in Slave of Love. I'm not sure, but it's a photograph of Elizabeth at the wheel, but it's so blurry that if we didn't tell you it was Elizabeth, you'd never be able to tell. But to my knowledge, there are no photographs of the interior of the bus, or I would have been on those like crazy.
Cassandra has another question. She said, are you planning to write a book about writing the book? She said,
No.
my favorite quote from you is when Baba said, I'm sorry I had to veil myself from you, a message to all of us.
Yeah, it is. It was just, I had so many experiences, experiences isn't the right word, but I had so many, I don't know, it's hard to find the right word. There were so many times when he assured me in big and small ways that I was doing what he wanted me to do. And that was worth more to me than anything, to know that. I don't know what to say.
Now we got lots of questions.
Okay, good.
Steve Jacobs says, Susan, it's such a pleasure to meet you and hear your wonderful stories. I will definitely buy your book. Thank you, and Jay Baba. So that's not really a question, but a nice comment.
Who was that? Do we know who it was?
That was Steve Jacobs. Good. And then Xerxes said, it was a beautiful and engaging session, and Susan is blessed to have opportunity given by Baba to write the same. Is Susan working on her next Baba book, Jay Baba?
I knew that was coming. No, I'm not. I felt like I really had to see this one through to the end before I gave that serious consideration. And I want to say no. I want to say, hell no, are you crazy? But I also have to admit that there's this part of me that misses that connection with Baba and that wonders, will I live long enough to finish another book? That's part of my thought, but it's like if I live to be 80 and I didn't write the book, then I'll be kicking myself. I do know exactly what it would be about, which I can't tell you. But the thing that puts me off it is the fact that I'd have to go back to Mehrabad probably have to go back to the archives. When I was there, of course that was 3 or 4 years ago, I was told about these materials that hadn't been cataloged scanned, or nothing had been done with them. They were just these raw materials. And I don't know if they've gotten to them in the meantime. Um, if they had gotten to them, I could probably work out a deal with them for them to send them to me and let me work on them here, maybe, Baba. But I kind of doubt that Baba would make it that easy. And I really am not sure I can face another trip to India. It's just too, I mean, even if I had $10,000 to spend on it, it's like the traveling back and forth. You all know this. It's like running the gauntlet anymore. And I just don't know that I have it in me to do that. Certainly not by myself again. So, oh, damn, I've said that out loud. So we'll just leave it to Baba and see if anything comes of it.
Judy Robertson just said, just wanted to mention there are approximately 50 videos of Marijuana's talks on YouTube.
I'm not even sure I got to YouTube. I don't think I ever got past mondelyhole.org.
Here's another one from Xerxes. What were the websites that Susan referenced photos from?
Meher Nazar, Zenfolio. Sheila, do you remember if there were any others? Well, we got a photograph from Australia. We got some photographs from Beloved Archives. What am I forgetting? There she is.
Okay. Yeah, the people in Australia, it was Goosey Carpenter and David Bowling. David is in charge of the Australian archives. And they found this picture, which they think Hedy Mertens took, but nobody knows. And it's the picture of all the luggage and all the baggage on top of the bus looking down on it. And it was just an amazing picture. They were just so helpful. They really turned the world upside down to get that.
Wow.
And they just received their copy of the book. And one of the jobs that Goosey does is that when she's in India, she researches the pictures and identifies all the people that are in it, and she gives information. And she's going to be reworking all of her notes from the information in the new book, because it's a great source. And she's so excited about it. And what they're doing also is Laura's recording this, and she's going to be showing this Zoom session in Australia.
Oh, great.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of enthusiasm out there for this book.
There's this message from Judy Robertson. She said, I heard so many parallels in your experience to writing the Blue Bus Tours to mine of working for 7 years on Korshed's biography. Thanks for all your wonderful work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then from Cheryl Garnett, will the stories and photos not included in your book be published at some time or put online?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of the things that Leah cut out were, well, I shouldn't say a lot of them. Some of the things that Leah cut out were stories that were already available in print elsewhere, just because we couldn't print a 1,000-page book. But where I really lost a lot of material was in the sidebars that I wrote. Oh gosh, I probably lost 3/4 of my sidebars or more. I mean, I just really kind of went overboard with them, I guess. But I loved writing them, and I loved the kind of peripheral research. They were like, I called them little detours, you know, from the main story. And one of the things I would love to do is to have a website and put all of those bits of information up there, because there was just no room to put them in the book. I mean, I have this vision of a website with, you know, like an interactive map, and you can just click on any place along the routes that Baba and the women took, and you know, you would have information pop up about that particular their halt in that particular place. But I think that I know that's beyond my technical capabilities. So if there's somebody out there who can do that and would be moved to. It'd be really wonderful, but because it would be wonderful to have another place, you know, to put all the stuff that didn't make it into the book.
That would be fantastic, says Cheryl, and I agree with her. That would be fantastic. Also heard from Astrid. She said, "Hi, Susan. Thanks so much for your inspiring recounting of your impressive accomplishment."
Wow. You're welcome.
And I think I'm at the end of the questions. So we still have a few more minutes if anybody has any burning questions, or Susan, if you had anything else that comes up that you didn't get to say before when you were running out of time.
Oh, no, I was pretty much down to what I wanted to say. I didn't have to leave anything out.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for this beautiful, heartfelt work for all of us to enjoy. Jai Meher Baba.
Yay, Baba.